It is absolutely essential that all members take action on Thursday of this week, either to attend activities in our local area or, most importantly, to attend the rally in the Sydney Domain at 11:30am on that day. The government's given us little option about taking action because, unlike previous situations, we don't even have the chance to go before an independent umpire. In the past, every public sector worker in New South Wales has been expected to negotiate through their union with the employer, the particular government department, and then if they can't reach agreement, then take the matter to the Industrial Relations Commission in New South Wales. Under the legislation passed by this government in the last few months, that right has been removed. So if we enter into negotiations with the government now, it's on their terms completely. It's about 2.5% fully funded, with any increase above and beyond that to be taken from teachers' working conditions. For us, of course, that means that we can agree to increase class sizes, for example, or we can agree to increase your face-to-face teaching, or we can agree that you will pick up the load that's created by teachers who are absent through some form of leave, sick leave or other form of leave. None of those options, of course, are acceptable to the New South Wales Teachers Federation, nor would they be acceptable to any teacher in New South Wales. Such changes, of course, will not only impact adversely on you as teachers in this community, not only would they undermine your working conditions, but they clearly would undermine the learning conditions of the students in our classrooms. An increase in face-to-face teaching, for example, would mean that there'd be less time available to support students and do the myriad of other tasks which teachers are expected to do in TAFE colleges and schools each and every day to support what they do in the classroom. If we were to agree to an increase in class sizes, 1, 2 or 3 students additional in each class in primary, secondary or TAFE colleges, again, it would mean we have less time to support those students and less opportunity to actually provide the quality education all of us want to provide for those young people in our classes. The government, of course, has the upper hand with this legislation. If we disagree with these matters, they can go before the Industrial Relations Commission and still argue for an increase for teachers. So later this year, for example, we may be in a position where we're saying no to these sort of changes to our working conditions and learning conditions of students. We may be saying that we're not prepared to barter anything for an increase above 2.5%. We might even, in some strange moment, say that 2.5% is enough. Not that we're likely to do that. But if we were to do that, the option is still there for the government to go before the Commission and argue that we should get an increase above and beyond the 2.5%. They could, for example, argue that we should be given 3.5% per annum over the next 3 years. Under those circumstances, the only role of the Industrial Relations Commission would be to determine whether or not what the government proposed to use to pay for that was sufficient to cover the cost of that increase. So the government could say that they wanted to increase class sizes by 3, for example. Anyone who's even moderately mathematically talented could work out that an increase of 3 students in each and every class across the state, in schools and TAFE colleges and other workplaces, would provide the government with savings which would be far in excess of anything needed to fund a 1% additional increase. However, the only role for the Commission under those circumstances would be to determine, yes, it does cover the cost, and then allow the government to proceed down that path. So even if we were to refuse any increases above 2.5% later this year, that would not protect our working conditions, would not protect the learning conditions of our students. Teachers have no choice but to support action later this week if they are concerned about the well-being of their own families, they're concerned about their incomes and protecting their real incomes over the next few years, and of course if they're concerned about protecting the learning conditions of students in our schools. What makes this particularly critical, of course, is that we're facing shortages of teachers in the years to come. In 2008, for example, the Auditor-General in New South Wales issued a report on the ageing of the teaching service. In that report, the Auditor-General indicated that between that period and 2016, some 50% of teachers would reach retirement age and leave the profession. Over the next few years, we clearly have to recruit thousands upon thousands of new teachers. Not only do we have to recruit them, we actually have to retain them in our system. And if you attack wages, you attack conditions, you attack the very environment in which teachers wish to provide the sort of quality education for students that we all want to provide, then we're not going to be able to attract them, nor are we going to be able to retain those teachers in our system. Of course, the dispute goes wider than just teachers. As important as it is for teachers, as important as it is for our students, it goes wider than that. These conditions that the government's put in place apply to all public sector workers. And over the next few years, we're going to face real challenges providing the sort of services that, again, all of us expect across the breadth of the state. We expect them from the police, we expect them from the firefighters, we expect them from the nurses, we expect them from the other health workers. In fact, we expect them from the whole range of people who provide those sort of community services in our towns and cities across New South Wales. with less attractive conditions, with nearly all public servants now facing real pay cuts, unless they're prepared to sacrifice significant working conditions, there'll be great difficulty in actually recruiting and retaining the sort of people we need to provide those services in New South Wales, and everyone will be the poorer for it. It's also interesting to consider this government's policies. Initially, they announced that they needed to find savings to fund a black hole in the budget. They in fact commissioned a person, Michael Lambert, who'd been a head of the Treasury under previous Liberal and Labor governments, to assess the so-called black hole that Barry O'Farrell announced he discovered immediately following the election. Mr O'Farrell announced that black hole exceeded $4.5 billion and placed the economy of New South Wales in a parlour state. Unfortunately for him, Michael Lambert, after assessing the figures provided to him by Barry O'Farrell, determined that there was no such black hole. In fact, he said if you want to look at the shortfall in the state budget over the period of time which Mr O'Farrell had referred to, it was the order of about $1.9 billion. And whilst that sounds like a very significant sum of money, in terms of the government expenditure anticipated over that period of time, it represents less than 1% of the budget. And he said it's an entirely manageable figure. He even went on to say that the $1.9 billion may be little more than a rounding error on the very large sums that one's asked to consider when looking at budgets over a number of years. And so with that gone, of course, most recently we had the Minister for Finance in New South Wales, Mr Greg Pearce, on the 21st of August in the Sunday Telegraph. He no longer referred to the black hole and the need to fund the black hole in New South Wales, and no longer referred to that as a reason for cutting public sector wages, but instead it was about providing savings to government over 4 years, and I stress over 4 years, so this isn't a short-term policy of the government that's only going to apply for a year or two. He said over 4 years, as a result of this policy, as a result of freezing public sector wages at the 2.5%, then the government would save the order of about $1.96 billion to fund infrastructure in the state. What that essentially means is that teachers, nurses, police, firefighters, government bus drivers and other public sector workers are being asked to pay twice for government policies in New South Wales. They're being asked to pay once as taxpayers and citizens in the state, along with everyone else, but they're being asked to pay a second time. And this time, this second tax, if you like, this second payment's to come directly from the wages, the income of you and your families over that period of time. So they're seeking to transfer $1.96 billion from your wages across to fund infrastructure. Now, infrastructure is clearly important, but it's important that it be shared by everyone, not that teachers and other public sector workers be expected to pay twice. This is one of those occasions when members really don't have an option to sit on the fence. If you sit on the fence on this occasion, if you go to work, for example, or if you stop work but just don't bother attending one of the rallies or activities on Thursday, the government will interpret those actions as support for its policies, and that would be a most unfortunate outcome. It's very important that everyone turn up at the local activities, everyone who can turn up at the rally in Sydney and the Domain in Sydney. It's very important we send an absolutely clear message to the O'Farrell government that its disgraceful policies will damage New South Wales, will damage the public sector, in our case will damage our students' prospects for the future. We have to fight now, we have to take this stance now, because next year will be too late. Next year the damage will be done. Next year we'll already have trouble recruiting the sort of people we need to recruit and retain in our teaching service. Next year the damage will have started to be done to our students. Absolutely essential that everyone take their stand now, join with their colleagues across New South Wales and show that teachers care, the public sector workers care, and we're not going to stand by and watch the government's poor policy destroy the public sector in New South Wales.